Fat girl's mother sold her to Mountain Man for medicine money. He said, "You're not for sale, you're for keeps." The snowstorm swallowed the town of Hollow Creek in a shroud of white, but desperation burned hotter than the cold. Martha Henley stood outside the ramshackle cabin of Nathaniel Cross, her shawl whipped by the wind, her hand clamped tightly around her daughter's wrist. Beside her, Rosalind Rose Henley kept her eyes down, cheeks red from more than frost. At 23, with a soft frame and a round face that the townsfolk never let her forget, she had always been the unwanted daughter. Tonight, she learned she was also a bargaining chip. $200, Martha pleaded, her voice cracking. "It's all I need for medicine. Without it, my boy will die. Take Rose, she'll cook, clean, whatever you ask. Please!" Rose's throat closed. Snow stung her lashes as she realized the truth. Her mother was selling her, not for love, not for a home, just for a vial of medicine. Inside the doorway stood Nathaniel Nate Cross, 34, broad as the mountain itself, with storm-gray eyes that missed nothing. The town whispered of him, the recluse, the haunted widower, the man with money buried somewhere in Raven's Peak. He watched the trembling young woman and the desperate mother, and something inside him burned. Slowly, he reached for a leather pouch and dropped it into Martha's hand. "Take the money," he said, his voice low, hard. "Save your boy." Martha's face broke with gratitude. She kissed Rose's cheek once, quickly, then disappeared into the storm. Rose stood rooted, tears freezing on her cheeks, waiting for the verdict of this stranger. Nate's gaze fixed on her. His words cut clean through the night. "But you are not for sale, you are for keeps." Rose Henley had never felt smaller in her life, though she was the tallest and heaviest of Martha's children. In Hollow Creek, she was the fat one, the daughter no suitor bothered with at barn dances, the girl the butcher's boy mocked behind her back. Her mother's pity came laced with scorn. Rose was tolerated, never cherished. She had long ago resigned herself to silence, cooking meals, mending clothes, watching others live. But tonight, something inside her cracked. Her mother's hands had pressed her forward like a parcel to be delivered, and Rose realized she was worth less than medicine. She could not even muster tears now. Shame had frozen her solid. The man who stood before her was not what she had expected. Nathaniel Cross was no wild beast, no mountain hermit with madness in his eyes. He was composed, shoulders squared in a coat of dark wool, his black hair peppered with snow. His face bore a solemn strength, like a monument weathered by storms, and his gaze, steady, sharp, unflinching, unnerved her. "Sit," he said simply, gesturing toward a chair near the hearth. His cabin glowed with lamplight, warmer than any place Rose had seen. Books lined the shelves. A polished piano rested against the far wall. A carved chessboard waited on a side table. It was a scholar's refuge, not a savage's lair. Rose hesitated at the threshold. "Sir, I should work. My mother," she said. Nate cut her short. "Your mother said many things. None of them matter here." He poured steaming water into a mug and set it before her. "Drink. You're shivering." Rose obeyed, though her hands trembled. The heat spread through her chest, but not enough to thaw the dread. "You gave her money," she whispered. "That means I owe you. People always expect something in return." Nate leaned back, arms folded. His voice was flat, but not cruel. "You owe me nothing. That money was for your brother's lungs, not for your body or your life. You're not a debt. You're not a transaction." Her eyes lifted to his for the first time. Then why? Why let me stay? For a long moment he did not answer. The fire crackled between them. Finally, Nate said, "Because no one should be treated like a commodity, not while I draw breath." Rose looked away quickly, ashamed of the tears stinging her eyes. No one had ever spoken for her like that, not her mother, not her sisters, not even her late father. It was too much, and yet not enough. Nate rose and fetched a blanket. He placed it around her shoulders without another word, his movements careful, respectful. For him, it was nothing more than decency. For Rose, it was the first act of kindness she had received in years. She sat by the fire that night, staring into the flames, wondering what kind of man this Nathaniel Cross truly was. A recluse, yes. A mystery, certainly. But one thing was already clear. He had not bought her. He had rescued her, though she did not yet understand why. And in that warm, quiet cabin, Rose Henley felt a fragile spark, something between fear and hope that maybe her life was not over yet. The storm did not ease for days. From the window, Rose watched snow pile against the cabin walls, trapping her in this strange new life. The town was unreachable, and even if it weren't, where would she go? Back to a mother who had traded her away like surplus grain? Back to whispers that mocked her every step? Still, she wrestled with dread. The man she now shared a roof with was powerful, unpredictable, and entirely unknown. At night, Rose lay awake in the small bed he had given her, heart pounding at every creak of timber, convinced she had wandered into a different kind of prison. On the third morning, Nate appeared at her door, boots dusted with snow. "Get dressed. You're coming with me." Her breath caught. "Where?" "Into the mountains. There's wood to gather, supplies to haul back, and you need air." Rose almost refused, but the quiet authority in his voice left no space for argument. So she pulled on the heavy coat he had left for her, boots several sizes too large, and followed him out into the biting cold. The climb was brutal. Snow clung to her skirts, her lungs burned, and shame prickled with every step. She stumbled often, feeling clumsy beside his steady stride. "You don't have to slow down for me," she gasped when he paused to let her catch up. "I'm not slowing," Nate said, his face unreadable. "I'm matching your pace. There's a difference." They reached a clearing where fir trees groaned beneath their burden of snow. Nate showed her how to test branches, how to split logs with careful precision. His hands were rough, movements efficient, but his tone never sharp. He explained, then demonstrated, then handed the axe to her. Rose hesitated. The tool was heavy, awkward in her grip. "I'll make a fool of myself," she muttered. "Then you'll learn," he said simply. The first strike jarred her arms, the second barely scratched the bark. Frustration rose in her throat until she caught him watching, not with mockery, but with patient expectation. She raised the axe again, swung harder, and this time the wood gave way. A thrill of pride lit her face before she could hide it. Nate only nodded. Better. By the time they returned to the cabin, Rose was exhausted, every muscle aching. Yet when she set the chopped wood beside the hearth, a strange satisfaction stirred in her chest. She had done something useful, something her mother had never thought her capable of. That evening, while snow hissed against the windows, Nate set a pot of stew on the fire. The smell of herbs and venison filled the room, warm and rich. He ladled a portion into her bowl first. She frowned. "You should eat before me. It's your food, your home. It's our food, he corrected, and a man eats after his guest. The words were plain, but they reached deep into her. For years, Rose had eaten last, scraping the bottom of the pot after her mother and siblings were served. Now, someone placed her first without hesitation. She blinked hard, hiding the sting in her eyes as she tasted the broth. Later, as the fire crackled low, she sang softly to herself a lullaby her father had taught her long ago. She thought Nate had gone to bed, but when she finished, his voice came from the shadows. "Sing again." Startled, she turned. He stood by the window, gaze fixed not on her but on the storm. "Your voice, it makes the silence bearable." Heat flooded her cheeks. No one had ever asked her to sing before. She whispered, "It's nothing special." He finally looked at her then, his gray eyes steady. "It's honest. That makes it beautiful." For the first time since she had arrived, Rose smiled without shame, and in that quiet mountain cabin, beneath the weight of snow and secrets, something began to shift, two wounded souls inching unknowingly toward each other. Winter settled heavy upon Raven's Peak. Snowdrifts swallowed the paths, and the outside world seemed impossibly far away. Within Nate's cabin, however, warmth grew not only from the hearth, but from the slow rhythm of two lives adjusting to each other. At first, Rose tried to keep her distance. She insisted on scrubbing floors, mending his shirts, hauling water, anything to prove she was earning her keep. Nate tolerated it for a time. Then one evening, he took the broom from her hands and leaned it against the wall. "You're not here as payment," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is not a debt to be worked off." Rose's jaw tightened. "All my life, I've been told I had to repay every kindness. Nothing is ever free." Nate studied her for a long moment, then set a wooden plate before her. On it rested a slice of fresh bread, steam curling upward. "Some things are," he said simply. She wanted to argue, but the bread was warm and soft in her hands. She ate, and for the first time in years, felt what it was to be cared for without strings. In the days that followed, their routines intertwined. Nate rose early to split wood, and Rose would light the fire, heating water for coffee. He showed her how to tend the small flock of hens scratching in a coop behind the cabin. She laughed in surprise the first time a hen pecked grain from her palm, a sound so rare from her lips that Nate turned, startled. He didn't smile often, but he did then a fleeting, quiet curve of his mouth that left Rose breathless. Afternoons were for study. Nate's shelves brimmed with volumes on history, philosophy, and science. He began reading aloud, his deep voice filling the room, pausing to explain passages. Rose listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration, and when she dared to answer his questions, he never dismissed her thoughts. "You see patterns most people overlook," he told her once after she suggested a solution to a geometry problem. "You're sharper than you believe." She shook her head, embarrassed. "I've always been told I was too slow, too plain, too much of everything that doesn't matter." Nate's gaze softened. "Then they were fools. You'll have a mind worth listening to." In the evenings, when the wind howled, Rose would sing again. At first quietly, almost apologetically, but Nate always sat near the fire, listening as if the notes themselves were medicine. Once, when she finished, he murmured, "You turn this cabin into a church when you sing." Rose flushed, whispering, "You exaggerate." His eyes met hers, steady and solemn. "I don't exaggerate. There were other moments, smaller but no less stirring. He always set her portion of stew before her first. When her hands blistered from chopping wood, he applied salve with a gentleness that made her throat tighten. Once, when she slipped on the icy steps, his arm shot out, steadying her before she fell. His hand lingered a moment longer than necessary, warm against her elbow, and she felt something she could not yet name stir in her chest. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Each night, as she lay beneath the quilt he had given her, she whispered to herself, "He is kind because he pities you." Nothing more. Yet in the quiet hours when she replayed his words, she wondered if pity alone could carry such weight. One evening, she decided to test it. She asked, half joking, half bitter, "Do you ever regret it? Letting me stay? Taking in someone like me?" Nate looked up from the book in his hands. "Someone like you?" She gestured at herself, at the roundness of her arms, the fullness of her figure, the freckles across her nose. "You know what I mean." For a long silence, only the crackle of the fire answered. Then Nate closed the book and leaned forward, his eyes steady on hers. "Rose," he said quietly, "I don't see what you see. I see strength. I see gentleness. I see a woman who has been told lies so many times she mistook them for truth. And if you must know," his voice dropped lower, "not once have I regretted it." Her breath caught, tears threatening. She turned away, afraid he would see too much. But in her heart a fragile warmth bloomed, fragile but growing, like the first bud of spring beneath the snow. For the first time in her life, Rose Henley began to believe she might not be a burden. She might be cherished. And within that mountain cabin, as the storm raged on outside, two lonely souls began to stitch themselves together with threads of trust, respect, and something deeper still. The mountain could keep out snow and silence, but it could not keep out whispers. Word of Rose's disappearance had traveled fast in Hollow Creek. Some claimed she had been sold outright to the recluse. Others muttered that she had run away in disgrace. None imagined that she might have found safety. Rose heard pieces of it weeks later, when Nate returned from the trading post, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the reins harder than usual. That night, while she stirred stew at the hearth, he finally spoke. "They're saying things," he muttered, "ugly things, that I bought you, that I'm keeping you against your will." Her stomach dropped, ladle trembling in her grip. "So they believe I was sold." "They believe what they want to believe." His eyes met hers, storm-gray, wounded, but steady. "What matters is what you know." Rose wanted to believe him, but in the quiet of her heart, doubts echoed. Hadn't her mother delivered her here like payment? Hadn't money exchanged hands? She fought the shame, yet it clung to her like smoke. A week later, the conflict came knocking, quite literally. One icy afternoon, hoofbeats shattered the stillness, and two riders appeared at the cabin's clearing. At their head was Aldrich Blackwood, Hollow Creek's mayor, his coat lined with fur, his smile thin as a knife. "Well, well," he drawled, dismounting, "so it's true. Our mountain ghost has himself a companion." His gaze raked over Rose, and she shrank back instinctively. "Miss Henley, your mother fears for you. She says you've been held against your will." Rose's lips parted, but no words came. Nate stepped between them, his voice low and cold. "She stays because she chooses. That's the end of it." Blackwood smirked. "Choice? Forgive me, but a girl with no dowry and no prospects rarely has much of that. Unless, of course, he tapped his cane against the snow. You're hiding more than a girl up here, Cross. There's talk of a silver vein on this mountain. Perhaps that's what keeps you so comfortable. Nate's jaw clenched. He said nothing. Rose looked between them, confusion rising. Silver? What is he talking about? Blackwood chuckled. Oh, he hasn't told you? Fascinating. His eyes glittered with malice. Ask your gallant host about the deed he hides in that chest by the hearth, then tell me if you're still here by choice. With that, he swung into his saddle and rode away, leaving silence thick as the falling snow. Rose turned slowly toward Nate. Is it true? She whispered. Do you own a mine? Nate's shoulders stiffened. At last, he nodded. Yes, a vein of silver discovered years ago. I keep it quiet. Men have killed for less. Her chest tightened. So, when you gave my mother that money, when you let me stay, was it because you pitied me? Or because you thought I'd be useful? Convenient? The words struck him harder than any bullet. He stepped closer, eyes burning. No, I gave her that money because a child was dying. I gave you shelter because you deserved better than being bartered like livestock. If you believe nothing else, believe this. You were never convenient to me. You were necessary. Rose's breath caught, but she turned away, wounded pride warring with fragile hope. She had begun to trust him, to believe his kindness was real. Now, doubt gnawed at her again. That night, long after Nate had retreated to his study, Rose sat awake by the fire. Her mother had betrayed her, the town scorned her, and now even the man who had saved her harbored secrets that could destroy them both. For the first time since arriving at Raven's Peak, she wondered if the fragile home she had found might collapse under the weight of truth. The storm came at dusk, not of snow or wind, but of men. Hoofbeats thundered through the pines, and lanterns flickered in the distance like eyes of predators closing in. Nate was already at the window, rifle in hand, his face grim. Blackwood's finally making his move, he said. He won't leave until he has the silver or you. Rose's heart pounded. Me? They think you're leverage, he growled. They'll use you to break me. Outside, a dozen riders circled the cabin, their shouts carrying on the frozen air. At their center was Aldrich Blackwood, smug in his fine coat, cane raised like a general marshaling troops. Nathaniel Cross, he bellowed, come out and sign over your claim, or we'll drag you out, along with that girl you're keeping. Rose trembled, but something fierce rose within her. She had lived a lifetime of shame, of silence. Tonight, she would not be silenced again. She stepped to Nate's side, her hand brushing his. We faced them together. He turned, searching her face. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. If anything happens, then it happens to both of us, she cut in, voice steady. A pounding rattled the door, then splintered wood. Nate raised his rifle and fired a warning shot through the night. One of the riders yelped and fell from his horse. The others cursed and scattered, but Blackwood only laughed. You can't hold out forever. The town will call this murder, and your little whore will hang beside you. The words lashed at Rose like whips, but instead of bowing her head, she flung open the shutters and shouted into the dark, I am not his prisoner. I am here because I choose to be. And you, Aldrich Blackwood, are nothing but a thief hiding behind office and lies. Her voice rang out over the clearing, silencing even the jeering men. Nate stared at her, astonishment flickering into pride. Blackwood snarled, his mask of civility cracking. "Seize her!" The riders surged forward, but Nate and Rose moved as one. He fired again, dropping another assailant, while Rose, with trembling hands, loaded cartridges the way he had taught her. Glass shattered. Bullets tore through the cabin walls. Smoke and gunfire filled the air. Then the sheriff's whistle pierced the chaos. Lanterns bobbed behind the trees, and a squad of federal marshals stormed the clearing, rifles raised. "By order of the governor, drop your weapons." Blackwood's men faltered. The mayor himself was seized, his cane clattering to the snow. His protests fell on deaf ears as the marshals read the charges: corruption, fraud, conspiracy to murder. Inside the cabin, Nate lowered his rifle, chest heaving. Rose's hands were still shaking, but her eyes burned with defiance. They turned to each other in the smoky glow, no longer hiding, no longer doubting. "You stood with me," Nate whispered. "I always will," she answered, and for the first time she believed it. When the last of the riders had been dragged away and the marshal's lanterns vanished down the mountain trail, silence returned to Raven's Peak. Only the crackle of the hearth and the moan of the winter wind remained. Inside, Rose and Nate sat side by side, wrapped in the same blanket before the fire. Her hair was tousled, her face smudged with soot, but her eyes gleamed with a fire fiercer than the flames. "You risked everything tonight," Nate said quietly, his voice roughened by smoke and emotion. "You could have run when they came, but you didn't." Rose shook her head. "For the first time in my life I had something worth fighting for. Someone worth fighting for." His hand found hers, calloused fingers closing around her smaller ones. "You're not here because of money or desperation or anyone's bargain. You're here because you chose to stay. That's all I've ever wanted." Rose felt tears slip down her cheeks, not of sorrow, but of release. She leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. For a long while they simply sat, listening to the fire and the soft sigh of the wind outside the cabin walls. Finally, Nate murmured, "You're safe here, if you'll have it. This can be your home now." Her breath caught at the words, home, a place she had never truly known. She whispered, "Yes, this is my home." The firelight bathed them in gold, as though sealing a promise. Yet beyond the walls, the world still waited judgments, whispers, dangers, yet unseen. Would their love be strong enough to withstand it? Only time and their hearts would tell. Every time I share a story like Rose and Nate's, I'm reminded how love has the power to change how we see ourselves and each other. It can bloom in the harshest winters, in the most unlikely places, and in the hearts of those the world has overlooked. Wherever you're listening from tonight, I'd love to know, do you still believe in love that chooses you when no one else does? Tell me in the comments. And if you do, don't go far. The next story is waiting just for you.